What's up, everybody? And today we're going to be checking out some Kapi Army, specifically their recent video on the oil tankers. I made a video on it yesterday. It was an interesting bit of events, and I want to get more information from it. And when I want to get more information on something like this, Kapi Army is the place I always go. They are phenomenal. They do incredible videos. They have great animation. I'd be very surprised if anybody on here isn't already subscribed to them, but if you're not subscribed, there'll be a link down below. Make sure you go over there and subscribe to their channel. They are phenomenal. Chris does a great job over there, and I think he has a whole team behind him doing this as well, which is really, really impressive. Before we get started, though, check out Chug, 10% off, link down below for the best drinking vessel in the world. I talk about these all the time because they're legitimately really good. Handmade here in the UK by a small business, ships to the US, free customization. Look, you can get your initial on it. Incredible. Free bag. You can take the metal part out to protect your wood. The rope handle's sick. If you want to look like a badass while drinking your drink, this is what you got to get. Also, if you love the outdoors, go buy yourself some Morale. I made a drink, and I'm very proud of it. I'm trying to model some of these big energy drinks companies do. So like Red Bull and Monster, where they take their profits and they sponsor extreme sports. We want to do the same thing, but sponsor outdoor activities. We're already making content on the Drink Morale YouTube channel and the Instagram. Go buy yourself some drinks if you're in the UK. If you're in the US, buy yourself some clothing, all that good stuff. Be a part of it. It's really exciting. I'm really, really motivated by it. It's a passion project of mine. Anyway, that's the spiel done. It took me a minute and a half. Let's go. I got it done quicker. Trying to get it quick, that.
Well, that escalated quickly because off the coast of Iceland, U.S. forces just launched a campaign targeting Russia, Venezuela, and Iran's shadow fleet of sanctioned oil tankers.
This shadow fleet is just a bizarre thing in itself, the amount of oil that's being shipped around for money.
Because it just led to a standoff between a Russian nuclear attack submarine and a U.S. Navy SEAL team in the Northern Atlantic. And it's bigger.
I didn't know it was Navy SEALs that did it. Obviously, you're presuming that it's going to be some sort of waterborne special forces taking these ships, and the ones to go to for the US is Navy SEALs.
Than that, because starting this past year, other Western nations like the UK, France, Germany, and Estonia have all started a global crackdown against these illicit tankers by intercepting and boarding them. The Shadow Fleet is a gigantic clandestine operation that Russia has invested billions of dollars into in order to continue to ship their oil to customers while evading Western sanctions.
Yeah.
To put it into perspective, Russia's Shadow Fleet now accounts for nearly 20% of global oil tanker capacity.
Holy
so,
shit.
Why do all these countries view these old Shadow Fleet tankers as worthy of risking direct confrontation? 2 weeks ago, the Bella 1 sanctioned oil tanker made a break for it. They tried to run the U.S. Navy blockade of Venezuela. The U.S. Coast Guard Legend Cutter class gave chase and followed close behind, demanding that they stop over radio communications. But the sanctioned ship refused, like a highway police chase on open waters. The Russian government told U.S. officials to stop following the boat, but they didn't listen either.
Well, that's the thing. The boat turned around and said, hey, we're Russian, so that the US wouldn't do anything about it because they don't want to rise tensions between Russia. But then they ended up just being like, yeah, we're going to take it anyway. Whatever.
The chase was on, and while the Bella 1 was fleeing from U.S. forces, they made their way from the Caribbean into the Atlantic Ocean. The crew on board quickly changed its name while fleeing. They changed it to the Mariana, and they basically swapped out their license plates while on the run. Then they painted a crudely drawn Russian flag on the side of the ship. Fair enough, I'm no artist either, but the rogue ship now claimed official protection under Moscow. This was seen as shocking because the whole point of the Shadow Fleet before was to provide Russia with a level of plausible deniability. Shell companies purposefully hid that they were connected to Russia behind confusing paperwork that would make my average infantryman brain explode. We're seeing a reversal of this now, because the reason that they reflagged themselves as Russian is because they believe that the U.S. forces would back down in the face of that.
Literally just said that. That's the idea, isn't it, with this Shadow Fleet, is to change license plates, as Kapi Army puts it quite nicely. And as soon as you change it to a country that you don't want to rise tensions with, then you expect someone like the US to back off. But the US didn't back off, and now a lot of other European countries are going to do the same thing. So it's not working anymore, this Shadow Fleet, is it? Or it is at the moment, but it's going to be cracked down pretty damn quick.
That the U.S. forces would want to avoid a major geopolitical incident of capturing an official Russian oil tanker, which is something that has never happened before as far as I'm aware. This move complicated U.S.
I'm trying to think, has it happened before? I don't think it's happened before. I saw a lot of oil tankers out when I was doing anti-piracy. One that was actually sinking, which was just insane to see out in the open water. And we had to like escort it. But I don't know what I wasn't someone who needed to know who that ship was a part of or whatever. I was just being told what to do back then. Do you know what I mean? I was just a teenager.
Efforts to seize the ship, because according to retired Rear Admiral Kenny, quote, once it legitimately registered, it gets the protection of the flag under international law, end quote. That puts American troops in direct defiance of the Russian government and military. Then Russia sent their nuclear Akula-class attack submarine and additional surface warships to escort the fleeing Bella 1 tanker to safety. Its deadly torpedoes were sent as a message, as an attempt to scare off U.S. forces.
But it didn't get there fast enough. We know that. We know that the U.S. already took it before that sub even got to it, which just shows the effectiveness of the speed. I'm pretty sure the U.S. troops came from Iceland when they took it. But I might be wrong, because I've also heard that they're doing a lot of sneaky beaky stuff from UK territory as well. The UK, obviously, we have a really close relationship with America. And we have a lot of American aircraft and vessels coming in and out of our place. It's just what we do. We're friends. We're busy friends. So it wouldn't surprise me if it came from the UK, but I actually think they came from Iceland.
Prevent the ship from being seized. The cutter would struggle to do anything against Russian submarine and warships, though. They needed U.S. military reinforcements.
Yeah.
But how would they get there in time in the middle of nowhere out in the Atlantic? So U.S. war planners came up with the idea of sending a P-8 Poseidon submarine hunter aircraft into the skies above by launching it from nearby friendly air bases in the UK.
There you go.
This drops dozens of sonar buoys into the ocean to map the location of Russian submarines. It can then fire a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo from the sky that then splashes down under the ocean water and homes in on the submarine using active and passive sonar.
Wow.
As further guarantees of safety, the US deployed Overkill with their AC-130J gunship. It has autocannons, giant howitzers, and missiles.
You say overkill, but if it's in the area, might as well use it. It's not doing anything else. If the lads are just sat on base, hanging about, they might as well go for a fly, aren't they?
It's a serious, great power standoff at this point, unlike anything I remember in my lifetime. All of these billions of dollars in military equipment are all converging on the location in the Atlantic, all over some empty, rusting, aging oil tanker. Part of the
thing is, it's not. So yesterday's video, I was talking about how it feels like there's more than just oil on it. Like, why put this much effort into getting it? And I had to think about it last night. I was sat there and I'm thinking, why would they go after this vessel? And then I thought, what happens if it's more simple than that? What happens if it's not about what's on the ship? It's just about the message. And I think that's what it is, ultimately. I think it's more about the fact that this ship tried to do what it tried to do. And the US is like, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do it anymore. I don't care what's on the ship. It shouldn't be allowed anymore. And so we're going to send a message. And I think that's what it is. And I didn't say that in yesterday's video. But I'm pretty sure it could have had all sorts on that ship. It could have had weapons. It could have had oil. It could have had, you name it, parts for vehicle, whatever. I think it was more about the message. Now, that's what I'm thinking.
The reason this is worth it from the United States perspective, though, is because the entire credibility of their blockade is on the line here. Then the U.S. sent a cargo plane loaded with the Army's 160th SOAR Night Stalkers and a team of Navy SEALs to the U.K. The Little Bird helicopters were loaded onto the deck of ships and sailed out to intercept this Russian-flagged illicit oil tanker. Wait a second, haven't I already done this mission somewhere before?
I said that yesterday! I said that yesterday on the video when I was doing it. I was like, I'm sure I played this on Call of Duty.
Britain helped the U.S. by providing their own air surveillance and naval support vessels.
Yeah, we knew that.
The SEAL team landed on the Artis formerly known as Bella 1. It got on the Russian ship's deck and quickly commandeered it, arresting multiple Russian crew members. These Russian crew are now reportedly going to face charges in America. It's almost unheard of for the U.S. military to take direct action against a ship that's under Moscow's registry.
Oh, God, it just feels tensions they're just rising, aren't they? They're rising and it's getting more worrying. I get it. The US has to make this stance. If it's gonna say what it's gonna say, it's gonna do what it's gonna do. Do you know what I mean? And the UK is obviously gonna help. We're obviously gonna utilize our bases and have troops. We have done since World War I. We've had US troops here and we've been best friends with them. And so we're always going to help. In fact, I believe, I'm going to make a bit of a statement here, and I'd love to know what you think. If the US did take Greenland, which I don't think they're going to do, not by military force, I should say, I think the only country out the whole of NATO that would still stick by America would be Britain. I really do. I think it would be very difficult for America and Britain to split ties at this point, even if NATO crumbles, because there's just too much investment in the two countries. The two countries help each other out too much. We lean on each other a lot. And you could say, well, America doesn't need Britain. That's fine. But Britain is not the only one, but it's one of the biggest places for American troops to be in Europe. And I think that's something that both countries are actually quite happy about. And that's why you're seeing not much information coming out in the UK government about condemning anything about Venezuela or any of this other stuff, is because they don't want to lose ties. That's what I think. Let me know what you think about that in the comments.
But what's more telling, I think, is that the Russian Navy didn't retaliate and instead stood down. But that's where things get weird, because the reason everyone is suspicious of the Bella 1 ship is because it's empty. There reportedly is no oil on board, which has people speculating, what's in the hull?
Yeah.
Is it Russian black market weapons that were meant to be smuggled to Maduro? Is it a Metal Gear? Is it nothing? What's in the box? Michelle Wise Brockman, a maritime intelligence analyst and expert on the Shadow Fleet, said, quote, there is a blurring of commercial and military shipping around the Dark Fleet. What we're seeing now is something that has really only emerged in the last 6 or 7 months. 6, 7. The UK government said that their involvement had nothing to do with Venezuela and was mainly just part of a wider crackdown on Russia's Shadow Fleet. A British official said, quote, we are stepping up our response against shadow vessels, and we will continue to do so.
Again, after thinking about it last night, I don't really know if there was anything on that ship, even if it was weapons and stuff. I actually think they've done this just for the statement. I really do.
I thought it was really interesting that we heard a spokesperson from the UK Ministry of Defense say that the Defense Secretary had called it a priority to disrupt and degrade the Russian Shadow Fleet. Pat McFadden, a cabinet minister in the UK, said, quote, the international community must recognize it's operating in a changed world in which hard power is increasingly being used to achieve national aims. I swear this...
There you go. That's me, just exactly what I was just saying then. The UK and the US are tight-knit. We are. And I believe the UK will always stand by America. But I also think although they don't necessarily come out and say it, I think both interests are always... helped with each other. I really do.
Never happens to my power. But why was it worth the near direct confrontation? The strange thing about the Bella 1 tanker is that it was originally sanctioned back in 2024 because it had ties to the Hezbollah and Iranian Quds Force. This wasn't directly tied to Russian oil per se. But to understand why Moscow risked their military credibility over one rusty tanker, you have to zoom out, because the so-called Shadow Fleet of sanctioned oil tankers has become really a strategic level asset for Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. It's called the Ghost or Dark Fleet, but what it refers to is about 500 tankers and 500 support ships that go along with it, that make up this armada of 1,000 vessels that operate under false flags in an attempt to bypass Western sanctions. Russia's invested in it since 2022 because it maintains their key oil exports since their invasion of Ukraine. And it directly funds their war against Ukraine and their capabilities to sustain operations.
Exactly. They're making money off this. It's helping the war in Ukraine, but it's also against what the West, NATO, America, and Britain have said about these sanctions. And so instead of just being like, yeah, these shadow fleets happening, there's not much we can do about it, they're actually putting the fucking foot down now.
Give you an idea of just how important it is, it makes up 60% of Russia's sea-time oil exports, and it brings in roughly $100 billion a year, which, to put into context, is more than all European countries have given to Ukraine's war effort since the beginning of the war.
That is insane.
This has provided a lifeline to Venezuela, Iran, and Russia. But what route are they normally taking? Most Shadow Fleet cargoes start from Russian oil export hubs like Primorsk, with crude bound west and south. They leave the Black Sea or the Mediterranean outlets.
So let me just go back to that image. Obviously, they're going past the UK this whole time. This means there is going to be a massively joint operation between the UK, potentially, you know, France and Spain if they're going through the English Channel here. But there's going to be a massive program, I bet, a massive operation between specifically the UK and the US to target the Shadow Fleet. It's going to happen. Look at this. It's going to happen.
As they head through the Bosphorus routes to reach southern and global markets. Or they leave Russia's eastern ports near the Pacific and the Vladivostok region for deliveries toward Asia. They transit via the Suez Canal, they do ship-to-ship transfers offshore in the Red Sea to basically launder the oil with legit oil to mask its origin. Increasingly, they're using the Arctic route to transfer oil to China, and that's why in 2025 we saw the first high-profile seizures of these tankers around the world. French boarding teams took over a Russian oil tanker, an Estonian force detained a crew, and then the Russian military sent a fighter jet to help other sanctioned vessels bust away and break free. The Russian military is increasingly sending naval and fighter jet escorts. Finland seized Russia's Eagle-S ship, which is allegedly part of this giant operation to cut undersea cables. Taken together, the reason all of this matters so much is because it directly threatens Russia's ability to wage war.
Yeah.
And so the obvious question is, what lengths is Moscow willing to go to protect this fleet?
That's the thing. We know we know Russia are already struggling for money. And if this is one of their major players for money, and the US, the UK, NATO in general are cutting down on this now, Russia are gonna. This is the thing. Like, we're seeing more and more pressure from Russia over the past few days, and I believe it's because they're starting to worry that this stuff's gonna get worse. And if it does, I think Russia are gonna start being a bit more aggressive to European countries, unfortunately.
Every action has a reaction, and this is a growing trend now where we're seeing in response the militarization of Russia's shadow fleet. Swedish Navy Chief of Operations Marko Petkovic said, quote, Russia's naval presence has become more permanent and present in large parts of the Baltic Sea in support of this shadow fleet. So Venezuelan and Russian officials have started placing armed military personnel on the tankers and disguising them. They're now discussing arming them with portable Igla air defense systems.
Wow.
We know the strategy of cracking down is in the air in Washington because the RAND Corporation, which is a popular think tank for DC policy, outlined a strategy to start cracking down on this shadow fleet with seizures like this. Several officials in the UK and the US have hinted that this is part of a coordinated effort to pressure Putin to come to the negotiating table. Former US ambassador to Brussels, Gordon Sondland, said, quote, in this way, Trump puts additional pressure on the economies of Iran, Russia, and Venezuela until he achieves the desired results. However, at the same time, seizing the oil tankers is also seen to be showing that the US has full control over Venezuela's oil. Some argue it's more about enforcing the 50 million barrels worth of oil that the US says Venezuela has agreed to provide. What we're seeing, I think, is like a non-lethal version of the oil tanker wars of 1984, where Iran and Iraq attacked each other's commercial oil shipping in the Persian Gulf. Over 400 ships were damaged during it. And this
that's another thing as well. I really hope none of these ships actually get damaged out at sea, spilling said oil into the ocean. Because as someone who loves the outdoors, that's heartbreaking to say. I would rather, people just confiscate it when they've got it rather than the ships actually going down. That would be devastating.
Also shows us how miscalculation can happen and accidentally spill over, because the sea mines laid by Iran to hit Iraq's oil tankers accidentally hit a US warship, and the US retaliated by sinking half of Iran's navy in a day. It's an
You don't mess with American ships, do you?
old naval strategy known as Guerre de Course, which I mispronounced, but it means a war of commerce, and it's been executed since World War I. So launching missiles at the shadow fleet or capturing the cargo has a similar end result. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of oil and tankers have already been seized by the US and Western nations in 2025. But here's how that's escalating today. And the way they avoided sanctions before was by hiding their origin and spoofing their location or turning off their transponders. But now many of the ships are instead overtly converting their flags to Russia. They're increasingly claiming that they're directly part of the Russian government. At least 17 oil tankers have switched to Russian flagging in the last month. This increases the chance of direct confrontation. And
It does make me wonder how that's gonna have a domino effect over the coming weeks and months. The more these start getting cracked down on, the more we're going to see people associating with Russia, the more tensions are going to rise between the West and Russia.
this is their way of increasing their security. Because once the US proved that it was willing to seize ships under a Russian flag, the rest of the Shadow Fleet didn't wait around to see what was next. There was a larger effort Right after the US captured Maduro, at least 16 oil tankers that were sanctioned by the US made a break for it. They all left at the same time in a coordinated effort to evade the American naval blockade. It appears so far some of the tankers were able to get away. The Shadow Fleet of tankers has become the new flashpoint in US-Russia relations. And the strategic thing to consider here is that once you capture a handful, it pressures other in the Shadow Fleet to not even try to violate sanctions. Meanwhile, at the same time, another sanctioned oil tanker, the M. Sophia, had 1.8 million barrels of oil, and it was captured in the Caribbean by another American helicopter assault. But this one actually has even way more grave consequences, I think, because the M. Sophia is sanctioned by the US Treasury Department as part of the official Russian Shadow Fleet crackdown. So this ship is directly being targeted by the US government because it's part of Russia's fleet, instead of really being focused on Venezuela. So what does all this mean? What are we witnessing here right now? Ryan Seberg, a director of Center for Strategic and International Studies, explained really well what we're seeing, saying, quote, "What I think is clear is that we're entering a new phase of great power competitions. Some of the things that we wouldn't have previously imagined being part of the operation are now on the table as options." And once you zoom out from Russia, you realize...
Well, it's not that. I think that all these big countries are starting to make a play for power now. China, Russia, and America. Russia's already invaded China, Ukraine. China's tempted to get Taiwan. America's tempted to get Greenland. They've already done Venezuela. So we're seeing power grabs by all three countries here. And I'm obviously, just like anyone else, I hope it just de-escalates a bit.
As this isn't just a two-player game, because the moment you start choking off sanctioned oil at sea, you're hitting other customers too, and this pulls in China directly. Because according to Reuters, Venezuela accounts for about 4% of China's oil, but on top of that, Venezuela owes payments of $19 billion worth of outstanding loans that they were paying back in oil, so the loss is felt even harder for China. That's enough money to buy 20 Navy destroyers. The reason all of this has outsized impact right now is because the oil tanker flare-up is happening at the same time as the US and Russia are engaged in a new round of diplomatic talks over the war in Ukraine. The big question is if the United States and the UK will really double down on seizing Russian oil tankers enough to hurt Moscow's bottom line and their war effort, or if this is just a big show of force, a giant dick swing. And if you like this video, check out this one about NATO's plan to deploy 800,000 troops to Europe. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission.
Great video by Cappy Army as always. I do believe that we're seeing quite a massive power grab over the next, over 2026. I think that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be quite worrying for a lot of smaller countries like the UK, who's kind of geography-wise, we're smack bang in the middle. But we are allies with America, and I do believe that American and British relations will always be there. I really do. I think it would be very difficult. Unlike a lot of other European and NATO countries, I think it would be very hard to break the two. You might disagree with me on that, but I don't think that's the case, especially considering how, yes, we've got a left-wing government right now, but it's looking like we're going to get a right-wing government, or a right-leaning government, I should say, in the next 4 to 5 years. And I think that'll just bolster the relationship between the two countries, especially if Trump's still in power when that happens. I'd love to know what you think in the comment section down below. I'll leave a link down to Cappy Army. Go buy yourself a chug, 10% off, link down below, and go buy yourself some morale as well while you're down there. Other than that, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.